Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Gwensil again. My name is Usman Mansare. Good afternoon to all my viewers. My name is Usman Mansare. I worked at Audit Service Sierra Leone, as Gwensil already introduced me. So I am the presenter for this business continuity and disaster recovery and the digital age. So what I have here today for you, the content here, I'm going to introduce to you the business continuity plan and disaster recovery, the key components of a business continuity plan, what organizations should consider when designing an effective business continuity plan, and a couple of business continuity plan case studies and examples. So under the introduction to business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan, it is sad to say that, but again, it's nice. Despite our best effort to maintain our organization existence, disaster at some point strikes every organization. So whether it's man-made, whether it's natural, or sometimes technical, disaster do happen at organization. Business continuity planning is the ability of a business to continue its operations in the event of a disaster. As I earlier said, disaster can be man-made, it can be natural, sometimes it can be technical as well. So the overall goal of the business continuity is to provide a quick, calm, and efficient way of responding to an emergency in the organization. So with a well-developed plan, business continuity, the organization should be in a better position to respond to any emergency in a calm way and efficient way. So what is disaster recovery planning? Because there are two words. We have the business continuity planning and the disaster recovery planning. But let me make it clearly here that the business continuity plan is the overall plan, the holistic plan that covers the organization as a whole. The disaster recovery plan is a subset of the business continuity plan. So the disaster recovery plan is a business plan that describes how work can be resumed quickly and effectively after a disaster. It concerns with restoring normal business operation after disaster. So while business continuity looks at the organization as a whole and is the first line of action when disaster strikes, the disaster recovery plan steps in when the business continuity plan fails. For example, when an organization, for instance, let's say we take the ICT division for example here, the disaster recovery plan might say, okay, the ICT division should take reasonable plans to make sure they lock the door of the server room or whatever security they put in place. But what if a thief or an intruder comes in, break into that door and cut away with the servers, all those things? That becomes a disaster because that will prevent the organization from doing its normal business. So then from there, the disaster recovery plan will kick in to make sure they restore the services back where it was to allow the organization to continue its business. What are the key components of a business continuity plan? We have the project scope and planning, the business impact assessment, continuity planning, and approval and implementation. So I'm going to take you through each of these components, which are the key components of a business continuity plan. So let's take the project scope and planning. The business continuity plan requires a structured analysis of the business organization from a crisis point of view. Now, when you form the business continuity team, which with the involvement of management, so the team is going to analyze the business from a crisis point of view. looking at different scenarios. What if this happened? All those things. Then from there, they will create the business continuity plan team with the approval of senior management. So this team will compose of different head of divisions from the different departments in the organization, because each divisional head or the different section of the organization, they know their division best. So it is good you involve them in the business continuity planning, because they will be able to tell us the risk that's applicable to their divisions. Then we move on to the assessment of the resources available to participate in the business continuity activities. Now we look in within the organization, we look at the resources. This is where we look at the legal team that is going to look in the area of what is legally applicable to us as an organization. If we don't put this plan in place, how we are going to get fined from whatever the laws say in our area. Then we move on to the analysis of the legal, as I said already, and the regulatory landscape that governs the organization respond to catastrophic events. So in different organizations and different countries, depending on the business, so they require different aspects of the business to be in operation. So if the business is going to go out of operation, there should be a stipulated time, maybe like banks, all those things, maybe the, let's say the cash machine is offline. So how long, we call it the recovery time or objective, how long must this particular service be offline without a fine from government or the regulatory body? So the legal team will look into these areas and advise. Then we'll move on to the business impact assessment. So in this business impact assessment, that's where we identify the resources that are critical to our organization, ongoing viability, and the threat posed to these resources. There are certain division or department in a business that the business cannot go without. So if those business are offline or cannot process certain requirement in the business for certain time, for maybe a day or two or hours, that will impact the business seriously. And this is the area the business continuity planning team will look into these divisions and look at the threats that pose to this organization, then how best they can mitigate them. Then when they are finished with this aspect, then they will move to the continuity planning. This is where they will focus their developing and implementing a continuity strategy to minimize the impact realized will have on our organization assets. So let's say, for instance, we look into our server room. We said, okay, our server room, our organization cannot actually do business if the server room goes down. So now they look at the server room, they said, okay, the risk to the server room is flooding. So now we look at it to say, okay, if the flood happens, takes over the server room, how are we going to continue doing business, or how are we going to minimize the impact it will cause to our server room? So this is where we put the plan in place. So if that happens, if the risk happens or the threats realize, how are we going to minimize the impact? Then the plan approval, which is so important, is very, very important, and implementation. We always seek management approval before we put this plan into action. Firstly, when we are deciding to implement or develop the business continuity planning, we have to make sure we have management approval. And if management approval is seek or is granted, and management is also part of the plan development, this area is always straightforward. But if management is unaware of this plan, then definitely it will find it difficult to seek their approval. And in the area of implementation, every business plan and disaster recovery plan must be tested on a periodic basis to ensure that the plans provisions are viable and that it meets the organization changing its because sometimes we change things in the middle of the year or the beginning of the year, or at any time we can do some changes. Maybe the finance division, they've got some changes. Last time the organization checked, they've done the busy continuity plan. There are so many changes. So it is always advisable to continuously and periodically test the business continuity plan to see if it's still fit for purpose and within the frame of the organization. Then we move to designing designing an effective business continuity plan. So how do we design an effective business continuity plan? So for an organization to design an effective business continuity plan, they must ask themselves these questions. How prepared are we in the event of any disaster, such as pandemic, as we've already seen the coronavirus, the disaster it has caused in the world as a whole? So we can ask these questions. How can we communicate with staff and each suppliers? Because we have our suppliers on a daily basis. We'll be purchasing equipment, all those things. What aspects of its function should become available during or after the disaster? So there, as I said earlier, there are functions in the organization that we cannot afford to lose for a day or even half a day. So we need to ask these questions. Then we look at scenarios. So what about if our business is temporarily shut down? Is it for a day, half a day, a week? So employee absent due to illness. What about inability to travel to work? Employees' inability to travel to work or access office building. So these are the scenarios we look into when we are developing our business continuity plan. So the business continuity plan case study, I have one case study here where most of us must have heard about the WannaCry ransomware. A ransomware is a kind of malware that attack a system. What it does, it encrypts the hardware, and the attacker will ask you for a ransom. They will say they've encrypted your hard drive. They will ask you to pay XYZ amount of money. And sometimes, even when you pay the money, there is no guarantee that they will decrypt your system. So this is one example where a poor business continuity planning. This was in England, their NHS, their health system. They were attacked by a ransomware where they, according to this website, they lose about 73 million pounds due to a poor business continuity plan. And it took them time to restore the system to its normal operation. And this was a patch they were not able to implement few weeks before this attack took place. And another example I have here is another firm. This was in America, but this was because they had a good business continuity plan in place and disaster recovery. Although they had these catastrophic events, but they were able to operate even their customers, because they have over 200 clients. This is a cloud-based vendor. So they have over 200 clients. The client did not even know that this organization went through this problem because of their strong business continuity plan in place. So these are just examples, a few examples I can state for business continuity plan. If you had a good business continuity plan, the benefit it will bring to the organization, and if you don't, the problem the organization will face. I thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Osman, for that comprehensive presentation. I think you are very detailed in terms of how you're explaining it, and you should actually even be a teacher, I think, because you are very detailed on explaining the processes and also the importance of BCP, but also just looking at what you've mentioned about NHS and the way they failed to fix one particular issue that led to this big attack. I think it's it's something that we need to also consider as organizations, because yes, it was NHS, but the next time it could be us. The concepts are still the same. We need to apply the same principles to avoid being affected the same way. So thank you very much.